Capricorn. That's like the culmination of all that social action. Here, there will be grand success in building empires, big states, great companies, the big machine, the city state, or the big city where everyone is like nobody anymore, because the system, this is the system kind of thing, yeah, and it's completely non-personal. Like Cancer was the most personal, now here is the most societal thing, yeah, where it's very tricky, because the individual person here is either the big ruler or the big manager, not manager, executive. It's like the president. If Sagittarius was the prime minister, then Capricorn would be the president. Yeah, nobody sees him, but he's the greatest thing. Yeah, but okay, here we have Earth again, like in Taurus and Virgo, but this Earth is now society's material resources, especially money, and all sorts of things that you can get from nature or whatever, to be used to build an empire, like Rome, yeah, for example, or London. Think of it the way you want. But that's the ultimate big state, where you can do a lot, because so much is accumulated there. There are so many opportunities that come from the system. And from people with ambition, typical Capricornians are connected with climbing the social ladder, caring about their career, their ambitious, aspirations, all those things. But it is very easy to become a slave to the system if you're not careful. Most of the time, you end up being a slave of the system. If you get tempted by things like power, fame, glory, all sorts of things, which are a result of getting so much money and so much power. Yeah. So if you make that mistake, you are not a true Capricornian. You then become really vulnerable and exposed, because the point in Capricorn, which is very capable sign when it comes to getting a job done, whatever job. It's extremely practical, reliable, resourceful, can wait for a long time until it achieves the goal, can spend years and years in certain things in order to overcome all the pressures from outside and get to where it is meant, where it wants to get. But if in the process it gets tempted by one of those things, everything falls apart. Because the point here is to stay true to yourself, to know why you are doing all those things. If you want to be the best lawyer in the city, say, I'm just thinking something, then do it because you care about this profession, or because this matches well your character. And when you do that, you feel good. Not only because of the money and the positions and the prestige, it's the social reputation here is very important, usually. So the tendency is to become sometimes opportunist. Is that the word? Opportunist, yeah. Have that. Could be that or could not be that. If it's not, it's the most trustworthy person you can meet. Great in authority positions, great as a chief of something, because managing of people is like managing of any other resource. They can manage resources really well, practically, and practically because of worth, but also tend to be very lonely, or lonesome, to isolate itself. That's when it cannot hold the pressure of all that's going on. You imagine if you work as an executive of a big company, so many expectations to yourself. You have a lot of expectations to yourself, and here you sense in Capricorn that this whole thing is about to finish, like we spoke earlier, that something is going to change in society because it just has reached the point of no return. When we have an empire, it cannot stay as an empire forever. Everything has to flow, has to change. There is always like this shadow of the revolution behind the empire, because when you have so many, say the ancient Rome was at some point so vast, so big, that it contained within its territories many different tribes and people from all over the world, and they were so different culturally from each other that it was impossible to control them. It was impossible to make them live together. when you have the big politicians and so many big companies, they become greedy, they become corrupt. You've got the big bureaucracy starting to play a role, and all those, you know, awful results of having money and having possessions. It's inevitable. Also, in order for the rich, which here we're talking about the big things, when the rich want to become richer and richer, they have no choice but to educate the masses, you know, the poorer people. And when they educate them, what happens is they rise. Yeah, they start being not very satisfied with what's going on and want to overcome. Yeah, at some point, sooner or later. So in Capricorn, if you are a strong Capricorn, you feel like you have a lot of power potentially, a lot of resourcefulness in your character, a lot of abilities, but you are very dependent on the big scale things. If nobody offers you the big job, you don't know what to do. Yeah, you may be the best to do that big job, but if it doesn't exist, what happens to you? Yeah, you can't go down to a level of personality, open my own business in which I'm selling ice cream and I'll be happy with this. If there is no big ambition and no big goal, it just doesn't know how to deal with things. And very often, I mean, there are many people who have a lot of Capricorn that don't do anything ambitious at all. They usually project that to somebody else, attach themselves to somebody, or become the slaves of the system. So they will go and work an awful job for very little money, but will never leave it because they claim to be respecting their boss or their co-workers or this or that. I mean, I've seen many cases like this. This is a negative turn of a Capricorn, where you can't separate yourself because you really, really crave for some authority. And you would go for any authority that is offered to you.
Is that more like Sun in Capricorn or Moon in Capricorn? Like, how would it...
Maybe more Sun. Because the Moon in Capricorn tends to be more... everything to do with the Moon is very personal. So personal is like the most personal. Things which usually don't involve work or... it's usually personal relationships and moods and feelings and things like that. And when the Moon, which is governed by Cancer, the opposite sign to Capricorn, by the way, is in Capricorn, then we give those things, these qualities to ourselves, to our lifestyle, which is about if you are a mother of 3 children, for example, and have the Moon in Capricorn, you would be very diligent and very reliable in your duties towards your family, for example. You would really be sticking to or be respectful to tradition. It's the most conservative traditional sign, Capricorn. Here, it's about, I mean, I will follow things which my parents followed because of out of respect for the big system. That stems from the same thing, wanting some big authority kind of thing. Yeah, and they're very difficult for them to not participate in this, as they feel like I'm nobody. Here, personality is the weakest in this sign. Yeah, and then what happens is the tide turns again. We've reached another kind of crucial point now. From this point onwards, do you know what in astrology, and this is again, I don't want to say that that's my idea because it's quite philosophical, and I read it somewhere, and I think this is really, really what it is. At Christmas, we celebrate in Christianity the birth of Christos. Yeah, and this is all like a story. There is a personage in the story, and so on. But actually, what this Christos is the day force, the so-called day force. Why? Because right there around the 22nd of December, we have the winter solstice. The winter solstice is the point in the nature, in the year, when the days, I mean, the nights are the longest. Here, the night force is the strongest. We have the longest nights, and from that day onwards, the days will start increasing. That's the point, that the light, the active part of nature will start having force again. It starts from very little. Like, that's why in Capricorn we can talk about the Christos and the Caesar. The Caesar is the state, the country, the big country, and the Christos is the little baby that has just been born there among that empire, like in Rome, and will be persecuted and will be feared and so on, but eventually will win. And that means eventually we are going towards the dates getting bigger and spring coming again. That's symbology. Yeah, from astrological point of view.
Yeah, yeah.
And you can think of it the way you want.